Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, episode 480, Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna, Part 5. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters. Today, I will continue with Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna. Here, the author looks at putting a value on assets such as the air we breathe, forest resources, coral reefs, mangrove swamps, and other phenomenons of nature. By pricing these, well, perhaps we'll be able to get a better handle on climate change. Today's show will feature background footage from Mount Mitchell, North Carolina. To get there, take the Blue Ridge Parkway heading north out of Asheville, North Carolina. Eventually, you'll come to Mount Mitchell. The entrance is off to the left. You go up the entrance road. Well, it's fairly long, maybe about 5 miles, but eventually you'll come to the parking lot at the summit. Here it is just a short hike to reach the summit. Also, we went down Deep Gap Trail a little bit on the lower end of the summit parking lot. So now let's continue with Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna. Now let's go to page 166 of Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna. In the end, scarcity reverberates in nearly impossible decisions. Who shall determine whether rights to use water can be transferred from farms to suburbs, or whether almonds should be grown at the expense of other crops, or cotton versus maize, or maize versus ethanol? Are the trade-offs and discussion points too complex for our decision-making system? And, invariably, do the rights of some conflict with the rights of others to the point of defying reconciliation? Can a market ever adjudicate fairly and equitably, given the excruciating scarcity of water, the omnipresence of demand for it, and its constantly changing physical location and condition? These open questions are in dire need of response. Now, let's go to page 169 of Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna. Meanwhile, an unglamorous villain haunts the water pricing stage: leakage. Not only can we not create new water, but we have also been wasting water at incomprehensible rates, wasting millions of dollars, too, in the process. Non-revenue water, NRW, is water lost to water utilities either through obsolete water networks, crumbling plumbing, or poor maintenance. Further commercial losses also occur through faulty metering and usage tracking, undercharging, or illegal water connections where one consumer taps into another. Non-revenue water also includes public purpose water provided as unbilled or least cost from the start, such as water used for fighting fires. Recovering non-revenue water doesn't necessarily mean that every flow should be squeezed for maximum revenue or that only high water fees can hold down consumption or recover commercial losses. Rather, NRW speaks to the generally avoidable level of water wastage in reasonably sophisticated water systems. The value and volume of NRW can be staggering, especially when water scarcity is so dire and so many people are without access to reliable water at all. Reducing non-revenue water should, in theory, improve water access and spread costs of water system maintenance more fairly, capturing water already in the system and adding it back without more water drawn. In 2018, the International Water Association, a global network of professionals and experts in the water sector, published research on NRW based on data collected from 109 mostly urban water utilities in 28 countries. The study concluded that worldwide, the cost value of water lost amounts to 39 billion US dollars per year, and that the overall volume being lost was equivalent to half the annual flow of the Ganges River in India, or 30% of input to water systems worldwide. The report observed not only is this an enormous financial concern, but elevated NRW also detracts from water utilities in a time of increasing scarcity and climate change, reaching their goals of full service coverage at a reliable level of service at an affordable price. The researchers concluded that in most situations, payback periods for investments in NRW recovery would be 7 to 10 years, adding that they found it difficult to understand why water utilities and governments are so reluctant to invest in NRW reduction. Advances in technology, especially AI, can cut into the NRW loss. High technical digital techniques to listen underground and locate leakages quickly at least cost, chasing down every wayward water drop. According to the U.S. EPA, about 1 trillion gallons of water leak away each year in U.S. households, equivalent to the annual usage of 11 million homes. Water gone through dripping faucets and worn out toilet floaters, treated to drinkability standard, but then never used, valued, or paid for. Now, let's go to page 190 of Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the shallow seafloor, and their mass is only about 125,000 square miles worldwide, spread across 100 countries, from Australia to Brazil, the Red Sea to Samoa, Mozambique to Mexico, Hawaii, Belize, and beyond. Intricate reef folds, contours, and colors so visually mesmerizing to humans shelter and nurture a staggering 25% of all marine species. Yet, according to the Status of Coral Reefs of the World 2020, a comprehensive report by the Intergovernmental International Coral Reef Initiative, ICRI, at least 1/5 and maybe 1/2, some scientists say, of the world's coral reefs are dead forever, killed off in the last 30 years thanks to reef bleaching and acidification resulting from warming seas, direct pollution such as toxic pesticide runoff from land, and numerous other detrimental influences. If projected global temperatures and polluting trends continue, and many effects of climate change are definitely locked in, regardless of best efforts, coral reefs could be entirely gone from the earth by 2070, only about half a century away from the study that said so. Increasing battering from intensifying ocean storms can only hasten this demise. This is both an environmental and a financial disaster. Putting coral reefs into such exacerbated vulnerability defies not only environmental conscientiousness, but also financial logic. Perhaps because reefs seem so fragile to the eye, lost in this perception is a reef as a formidable economic force, a phenomenon of nature for which we must be economically grateful and on which we are economically dependent. Now, let's go to page 199 of Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna. In fact, humans cause roughly 90% of wildfires, either through outright arson, accidents, or negligence. Sparks can fly from railroad tracks or utility power lines. The careless tossing of a match, or the failure to douse a cooking fire. Catastrophe occurs when climate change exacerbates these human failings, and proximity to woodlands with intensifying timber conditions due to drought and heat waves. In the United States, all states face some wildfire risk, but California stands out. Tables have turned since wildfires were once a bearable occurrence. California's Legislative Analyst's Office summarized the shift in its overview of the state's 2022 to 2023 budget. Historically, significant parts of the state would burn annually, especially during the warm, dry months of the year. These regular fires played an important role in keeping the state's forests and landscapes healthy. However, in recent decades, California has seen some of the worst wildfires in the state's recorded history. For example, the 2018 wildfire season included the Camp Fire in Butte County, which became the single most destructive wildfire in state history, with nearly 19,000 structures destroyed and 85 fatalities, including the near total destruction of the town of Paradise. Traditional liability, insurance, and credit ratings systems creak under the weight of mounting costs of wildfire devastation and loss, especially as the causes of fires emerge. For example, California's largest utility, PG&E, also the nation's largest, admitted that faults in its transmission lines triggered wildfires in some cases, then filed for bankruptcy to shield itself from potentially thousands of 2017 to 2018 wildfire liability claims. The utility reported to the U.S. SEC foreseeable liabilities as high as $30 billion, towering above only $1.4 billion in insurance coverage. Setting the scene for further debacles, the utility added, PG&E also expects to face increasing difficulty securing liability insurance in future years due to the availability and to face significantly increased insurance costs. True to prediction, in 2022, PG&E settled with California's Sonoma County for $55 million in connection with the 2019 Kincaid fire, in part to avoid criminal charges tied to negligence that caused injury to firefighters, destruction of roughly 300 buildings in California's wine country, and evacuation of about 200,000 people, plus the burning of 120 square miles, including vineyards. Now, let's go to page 201 of Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna. Restoration is a tender, loving care process, gateway to forest benefits, almost tree by tree, costly and endless, as long as we expect to need or want forests. Restoration amounts to forest gardening with a menu of techniques, including controlled burns. Although as human settlements spread closer to forests, controlled burns are limited to avoid danger of wandering smoke and flame. While some ecological theory suggests that the best forest management is to leave forests to their own devices, a hands-off approach becomes less viable given human encroachment on forests and as climate change introduces vulnerabilities that natural processes cannot overcome. Active restoration means strengthening resistance to fire overall by regular thinning, trimming fire breaks, meadow burning, removal of parasitic species that overly suck water, and, importantly, clearing combustible felled branches and brush from the forest floor. Restoration work also generates jobs, of course, for climbers, foresters, drivers, hydrologists, and others, especially the collecting and transporting of underbrush and putting it to other uses, including biomass energy. Despite the benefits, restoration budgets chronically fall short. In 2018, the U.S. National Forest Service, which is also responsible for managing fire risk in California on federal lands, estimated that 6 to 9 million acres needed treatment to increase their resilience to the impacts of disturbances such as wildfire, climate change, invasive species, and human population growth. The Forest Service tried its best, restoring 200,000 acres per year, but admitted that even at this aggressive rate of treatment, it would take 30 to 45 years to treat the number of acres needed to make the difference. Now, let's go to page 209 of Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna. Perhaps the most important long-term contribution of the FRB is its treatment of healthy forests as an essential infrastructure that requires maintenance, natural infrastructure to fend off wildfire and all destruction that can follow. Once recognized as infrastructure, forests acquire the financial profile of physical capital, desirable capital assets enumerated in capital budgets and deemed to embody and return long-term value. Capital assets also may be borrowed against and paid for over a presumed lifespan, adding to the options and financial stamina of the asset holder. By extension, capital assets demand stewardship and that depreciation be held at bay. Forests listed as capital assets mean the more environmentally robust the forest, the more financially robust the asset, and the balance sheet of the asset owner, namely, in the case of public forests, the public itself. Booking forest in capital budget endows them with a level of forward-looking attention consistent with keeping forest value as high as possible, as compared to operational budget planning, whose main goal is to keep costs as low as possible. Now, let's go to page 214 of Pricing the Priceless by Paula Diperna. Peatlands statistics punch out warning. According to the UN's 2022 Global Peatlands Assessment, GPA, even though peatlands cover only 3 to 4% of Earth's surface, they contain up to 1/3 of the world's soil carbon. This is twice the amount of carbon as found in the entirety of Earth's forest biomass. Keeping this carbon locked away is absolutely critical to achieve global climate change goals. Locked away sounds so simple, but such renunciation is the heartbeat of the global climate challenge and the dilemma of value. By definition, keeping peatland carbon locked away means forsaking its energy potential, actually giving up and turning the eyes away from its tempting presence to, in best case, restore peatlands where possible and, above all, not to disturb or burn peatlands still intact, to lock away needed energy sources as much of people who hear a constant refrain about environmental issues that are absolutely critical and puts the need to address climate change in an unworkable dependency on a surrender to sacrifice, begging the question, for what is forsaken? What will be given? Ireland presents a vivid case. A developed country in the European Union with an environmental leadership profile squeezed between best intentions and complex imperatives. Though representing just 1/20th of a percent of Earth's land surface, Ireland hosts nearly 3% of Earth's Casey Waters Show. Producer Casey Waters. Graphic editing Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, caseywaters2@caseywaters.com.